strong, empowered, authentic.
What's up, Ginger Nation? This is Tosh.
This is Darren, and you are listening to the Authentic
Ginger Podcast. Welcome to the Authentic Ginger Podcast. I'm Tosh Taylor.
And I'm Darren Roach, and on today's show, this is going to be really fun, Tosh. I'm going to give you the intro right here. For the last 19 years, Captain Ahab and Jeedge have accomplished over 200 adventures together. They have shared many tales with thousands of individuals on the road through their travels and live presentations. I can't wait to get into this. Ahab, just so you know, Tosh, is a 3-foot-tall, 40-pound, bright yellow, wooden fisherman wannabe pirate captain who seeks to accomplish any goal that sits in front of him. So I'm not sure who we were welcoming to the show, but it looks like we're welcoming Captain Ahab and Jeedge. Welcome to the show, guys. How's it going?
Cheers. Yeah, that's exactly how it is. Usually I'm following him around. I don't usually get the invitations.
Yeah. So I'm going to start this off right quick because this is something we talked about prior to the show. As a redhead culture podcast, which I know you can tell I don't have red hair, but I'm my co-host here, Tosh. She absolutely does. As a redhead culture podcast, where does Captain Ahab fit into the mix?
So when I saw you guys, I just instantly assumed that before Captain Ahab went white, as you see here, that he had a ginger full head of hair is what I think.
Yeah, it kind of looks like he does too, hey Tosh?
Yeah, I can see him being a ginge, totally.
Yeah. How long have you known Captain Ahab?
He's been in my family for almost 80 years now.
Come on.
Okay, we need the whole story.
Yeah, let's back right up.
Who started this, and how did you end up with him in your possession?
Yeah, so my grandfather was in World War II, 1943, in the Navy, and it was a common prank among people who were serving, sailors, anybody in the service really, that they would hear about a prank where you would commandeer something from the port town and sort of make it a stowaway on the ship and write letters, plaster it with cargo stickers, whatever, amenities you had to make a story for something that might not normally have a story. And not only did it distract all the men from really what they were going to do and leaving their homes and all the worries and concerns they had, and it gave them a focus while they were serving. But with my grandfather and his naval comrades, they got back to that port safely about 2 years later and realized that they sort of celebrated the whole prank a little too hard that night. And 2 years after a random night in a town you don't live in, you don't really remember the layout. So they never brought Captain Ahab home, only because they couldn't find the place again. So he just stayed in the family. All those men became family. They became uncles of all of us and things like that. And for 59 years, it grew. And then when I was 10 years old, I found out about the decades of traveling they had done with him and the camaraderie that they had with him. And they passed them on to me when I was 19.
So you think that Ahab identifies as a ginger. Do you come from a line of gingers? Like, was your grandfather a redhead?
So no, none of the men were. I think he was just
that you know of.
Well, then we need a redhead. Yeah.
Filled out the group nicely.
I love this story so much. And he still looks like he's in impeccable shape. But do you worry when you travel the world with him that someone's going to go, oh my God, that's the guy that was stolen from our town?
Yeah.
So I think, honestly, that would be awesome, because I always joke that there's, grandchildren on the other side of this story that are hunting me down. But, I figure if I keep going on podcasts and speaking places and traveling, one of these days, somebody's going to give me clues to the past that I don't have.
I want to see you paint Captain Ahab as a redhead, just so we can see what he used to look like.
Yeah. I should give him like one little curl or
one little curl,
right? Yeah,
that's right,
under the hat.
If people don't know who are listening who Captain Ahab is, maybe we should talk about that, because I was like, maybe they have portrayed him ever as a ginge before, but the idea for the name, I assume you got from, well, actually, wait, did your grandfather name him Ahab?
So they had other nicknames for him, but when we sort of took it over, I grew up in the Berkshires. So like Moby Dick was written here in Pittsfield, looking at Mount Greylock and things like that. So there was a lot of history to the name for where we came from,
Mm-hmm.
but that was sort of their like slang name for them all the time type of thing. And I liked it way better. Yeah. Ahab's Adventure sounds a lot better off the tongue.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing they didn't do, back in the day, it wasn't like you had a camera in your pocket or even around your neck at the time. So they were just, storytellers in the most, like the basic form of that. And they always were big fishing stories and things. And when I took it over, it became more of a photo documentation type of thing, where if you hear the story, you take pictures with them, or the places we go, we take pictures and just sort of let people come to their own conclusions about the things they see with them.
And you've been around the world, around the world, which I want to get into shortly. But I did want to ask you about the appearance. Has his appearance changed in these 80 years? Has that color yellow been changed? Was there anything that has changed on him? Anything broken that's been replaced, or is he still completely original?
I would say about 95%. The coat I used to paint just because he was big and bright yellow and things like that. But the more advanced camera technology has gotten, the worse it is to make him one solid color. It almost throws off the hue of every picture. He doesn't look real in some of them. So right. I've been sort of leaving the wear and tear on him.
Right.
He used to be, as you can see, his beard and things and his nose are a little weathered and stuff like that. I've never painted the face. He's slowly aged over the years. His base took on the most damage because he was a lawn gnome at some point. So he was just sitting in a yard, and I've done surgery on him to protect it a little more and make it so all the places we go, like we've been to like car shows where people want to just put them on things that are expensive. So we've sort of made the bottom into something a little more soft and gets us in less trouble when people don't understand quite what they're grabbing and putting places for pictures or things like that.
So Jeedge, you take this idea, but then it obviously just at one point in your life, it blows up and you go, like, were you planning on doing what you do, traveling the world, motivational speaking? Was this something you had wanted to do, or did Ahab kind of help you bring that out?
So I'm pretty sure nobody wants to be a public speaker. Like nobody grows up having that sort of courage to be in front of people and things like, or maybe. Yeah. It wasn't me for sure. No, I thought my grandfather and uncles there, his naval comrades, I saw them get back together every year. Once a year, they play a card game, and whoever won didn't win the money that they all threw in, but they got to pick the location of the next adventure. So growing up, I always thought this would be something that kept my friends together. Like, how we all think about it. Like we want to keep our best friends for as long as we know them. Right. But these guys stayed together for half a century doing this little hobby of theirs. And I thought if that's all I got out of it, that would be great. Just keeping my friends coming around. Cause even at a young age, I knew how people sort of grow apart or just, you fill your schedule and don't realize your friends are the ones you sacrifice. But after college, when, we got out in the world, it just, everybody was talking to us and asking us questions and willing to help us accomplish things over somebody that, any other stranger they were passing. And we didn't quite know what we had until, years later and just sort of trial and error, learning all these things about carrying around a 40-pound lawn gnome.
I mean, for instance, he has been to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is no small feat without an extra 40 pounds on your back.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. We just finished that. What was it? 2-3. It was January 28th, I believe, is when we summited. Before we started recording, you were talking about the beard. I grew that since, like, I stopped shaving the day before I left. And then it just sort of got carried away, like you were talking about. But yeah, Kilimanjaro was the best, worst adventure I think I've ever been on. It was beyond challenging, and we trained for years before that, and it was still the hardest thing I think we'll ever do, to be honest.
And how many of you made that trip? You go with a group, right?
Yeah, so we went with Climbing Kilimanjaro, just a tour group out of the base of the mountain, and they had between the guides and porters, I think there was 47 of them, and then there was 13 of us. But we only came, it was myself and my buddy Chuck, who's been traveling with us off and on since the beginning. But there was only 2 of us that went with Ahab, and then we joined a bigger group and a bigger tour group type of thing.
What do your friends and close folks? I mean, you know, they obviously know that this is a big passion. Like, this is something you're trying to keep living on. What do they? How do they look at it? What do they feel like they're a part of the adventures of Ahab, or do they kind of look at you and go, "He's the real adventure. We just want to support him." Like, how do you guys interact that way?
Yeah, so that's sort of exactly how it happens. It's, you know, one of the first things we did when we became caretakers was we went to the world's largest ball of twine with them. And it wasn't so much that we wanted to go, but when we said, hey, we got to bring Ahab here, you know, for whatever excuse we made up, everybody wanted to jump in the car. But if I was like, hey, do you want to drive 25 hours to that? You know, we'll take a week and do it. You'd be like, why would I waste my time type of thing? But it's just how you said it. It's more Ahab's going on these things and you sort of want to be there to see what happens and be a part of it. It's not so much that we want to go.
Right. And are you purposely developing trips to go on to expose at Captain Ahab, or is it something that you do anyway if you didn't have him?
I think he has made me do more than I ever would have done. Like I've always been sort of outgoing and wanted to travel and loved it and that kind of thing. But I think the characteristics of the people that travel with him are just sort of exaggerated, or like it just expands what we normally would have did, or opens up more doors, or removes that red tape.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell by your following, like, people honestly care what is happening with a piece of wood.
Yep.
Yeah,
well, he's not just a piece of wood. I mean,
well, I get that, but
yeah. I'm just
I
kidding,
understand what you're saying. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. I mean, you brought up Kilimanjaro, which is obviously the most extreme thing. Not everybody's interested in climbing one of the 7 summits, never mind more than one. But we've done things from whitewater rafting to trekking through Patagonia to like going to comic conventions or museums and things like that. It's more about, if you're passionate about something, you should be making an excuse to do it. Like, right. I don't need to carry 40 pounds with me, but it somehow makes the experience better.
Of course. Yeah. And like, I'm just thinking to myself right now, which is you've probably experienced this with other people you've introduced Ahab to, is where would I take him? Like, Tosh, are you thinking the same thing? Like, where would I take Captain Ahab if you were in his sights? Like, I'm thinking about that right now as we're talking. Like, where should I take him? Where can I meet him? Like, you know?
Yeah. That's been the thing since COVID, and we've been on more and more podcasts now. Before, people used to come to my dorm room. He was my dorm room doorstop, and it would make you ask a question. I would trade a very small story, because there wasn't much time behind it at the time, for a picture with him and whoever heard it. And then as it grew, I'm starting to meet people all over the world before we meet in person now. So I'm having a hard time following my own rule now, because he's bigger than he ever, not should have been, but than we ever expected it to be. It was always going to be a life hobby of mine. And now it's what I center my life around.
The stories you tell, the tales you tell, are they tales that have been passed down to you, or are these your own that you've established through your travels, or do you combine two? Both. So
usually I'll give a little backstory, like I gave to you guys, a little more detail about the card game and the details of the dates and things like that. But for the most part, it's our travels together and things. My grandfather and uncles there, I was 10 when I started just, looking around the corner, trying to like hear every conversation. They were very open and welcoming, even to a 10-year-old. Probably shouldn't have been telling me half the stuff that I heard. Right?
That's right.
But I never experienced that stuff. Between 10 and 19, it wasn't like I was traveling or doing anything, an adult normally would type of thing in that sense. So I was just living through them, but I didn't experience anything with Ahab until 19, really. So even the stories they told, I'm pretty sure they were big fishing the whole time. They definitely, especially without documentation, I'm sure some of them were exaggerated, but for them, it was more about just getting back together. All year, my grandfather maybe said 10 words total, when I was with him, type of thing. And when he was with these guys, he said, he would talk for 10 hours straight. So it's just, they all reverted back to just sort of themselves and let their guard down. And just, I really understood what friendship should mean early on.
I think that that's one of my things actually that I love about podcasting is that people are getting back into storytelling and realizing how important storytelling is, and how just listening to someone talk, whether the story is a big fish story or not, it really changes the way you look on life. Instead of, staring at a TV screen all day or whatever. I absolutely love the thought of people sitting around a radio and listening to the same story all together all the time. And that's exactly what these men were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I, like I said, I grew up listening to stories around campfires or a card table, or, me and my friends, worked or lived at the movie theater for the most part growing up. So it was always engulfed. We were always engulfed in some kind of story, one way, shape, or form. And I think that was a big part of how it was a lot easier when we started, where we just had a focus for it, or we had somewhere to, channel our energy through.
Did you draw inspiration at that age from those experiences? Can you remember that and go, you know what? Like, not knowing that it was going to be passed on to you.
And all I can do is assume, right? At 10 years old, like even my nieces and nephews now, they're all getting to about that age, and you can tell what they like and don't like. You don't necessarily, you can't pinpoint it to one experience, but there was 34 of us, there was a dozen of us in the sort of age range, or that could have been me right now type of thing. But I don't know why I always wanted to hang out with the older people in the family versus running around out on the land with the kids and stuff like that. It's just one of those things. I don't know where I got those characteristics and things like that, but I knew there was something about the statue, I feel like, and just, I don't know. I enjoyed what they were doing. I enjoyed, like I said, the camaraderie they had was different than just like, oh, your parents' friends that come over and they all get along. But there was just such a strong bond between these men, and it was just something I really wanted in the future.
Now, when you are out and you're doing your speaking, so high schools, colleges, universities, you're taking Ahab along with you. What are some things that, so say we've got some schools listening, what are they bringing you in to talk about?
So I try to encourage, especially at like high school, university, that level, where they're 4-year time blocks for the most part. And it's knowing you have a calendar already set for other goals, classes, graduation, stuff like that. But it's making a timeline within those goals about getting things done and really focusing, because there's only so much time in the day that we all know and everything like that. But we think 5 minutes isn't enough time to complete part of a task. Everybody wants to have, if I had 6 hours today, I'd sit down, and like edit all the podcasts at once or do right. But most of the time you're just doing it all the time whenever you can, type of thing. So it's things like that, and understanding that your best friend is probably the stranger sitting, 2 seats away from you that you just haven't met yet, and finding a way to open those first awkward conversations that we have daily most of the time, and not even realize is the way to start any adventure.
So tell me what you went to school. Like you've mentioned college a couple of times. What did you actually go to school for?
So that was the thing. My grandfather brainwashed me into piracy early on, right? So he joined the Navy because he was drafted.
Right.
So he went and joined the Navy because he was like, this is the closest thing I'll be to modern day piracy. And that's sort of how I grew up thinking about what I wanted to do, was how can I incorporate what I'm passionate about, or what I've been brainwashed to be passionate about, probably. So we went to school for marine biology, because I figured we would be mostly out in the ocean. We could, dress like a pirate if we wanted to, things like that. And then I would fill my summers with jobs like summer camps or whitewater rafting and things like that, where, again, I could just act like a pirate in that sense.
I don't know if you ever sit back and think to yourself, wow, this really meshed together really well.
Well, so, and that's something I talk about also, like right now, I already know the ending to my caretaking time, hopefully, with Ahab, because I already saw it sort of happen with my grandfather, right? So I'm going to do it not the same way, but I know at the end there should be a group of people that I've met along the way around a card table, and within our families, you know, blood related or friends or whoever it is, there should be somebody that we just know it's the right fit for. And that's sort of the goal. I know the sort of dots I want to hit on the way, but looking back, it does seem so smooth that it's happened like this, even though, you know, when we went whitewater rafting 15 years ago or something and thought it was the biggest accomplishment we'd ever done type of thing. And then 3 months ago, we were literally, you know, on top of Kilimanjaro. So it's like those things we couldn't have planned out as good as it's happened so far.
It's pretty neat that you're curating relationships. I mean, you know, like you said,
Yeah.
you know, earlier, where you're sitting, you could be sitting beside somebody you've never met before, and they could be that person that does Kilimanjaro in another 5 years from now with you. Like, you know what I mean? And I really like that connection and how that works. Have you had people reach back out to you after you have seen them or been in front of them, spoken to them, and said, hey?
Yeah, so I've met a ton of groups. One that a group of guys from one of the universities we spoke at took like a stormtrooper. I don't know, it was like 2 feet tall or something. That's their mascot. And they have a big cigar in its hand and things like, I don't know. They gave it all these accessories. Every once in a while, I get a picture from them getting back together. It's not, they don't do as much as I do, but it's just sort of their reunion type of thing. And that's what I tell people. We do so much together, but even if you just have that, at least we get back together once a year, or we go on this thing once a year, do just have it where you never break that tradition that you have, is really the goal.
It's funny. I hadn't thought of it until you just mentioned it, but my brother and I backpacked Ireland more than, I don't know how long ago, it was a long time ago, 12, 15 years ago now. And we took, my grandmother's biggest regret was that she never went back to Ireland and never saw it as an adult. So we took her glasses and we took pictures of her glasses in all these places around Ireland, like places where our family was from. And I didn't realize that at the time that's what we were doing. But
that's really cool.
Yeah. You know, I knew what we were doing, but I wasn't realizing that the sentiment to have it all these years later too. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's power in objects and things and giving them more of a backstory and all that stuff. Before we were speaking at universities and all that stuff, and sort of Ahab was funding the trips himself instead of the other way around. We did a Kickstarter to go to Ireland and kiss the Blarney Stone and all that stuff. And we took pictures of people and just put them on popsicle sticks and like stuck them in corners of the pictures and things. And we made scrapbooks for them to say, go back and put you in where I put your picture instead, type of thing. And that's how we used to fund stuff like that, just making an army of people that couldn't necessarily come with us at the time, but they could come with us in terms of we'll give you sort of a reason to go back, like to make another scrapbook to match this one. And I say that because I took my grandmother too, because she was too old at the time to go, but it was one of those places she always wanted to.
Okay, I want to go back to the speaking for a moment, because something with this podcast, what we hear from a lot of our guests as redheads is that they disliked their time in high school. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you're going out and you're talking to these high school kids. You obviously still have a very solid group of friends. I'm still very close with all the kids I grew up with. I feel like I want to know why you think it's important for people to create those bonds and keep those bonds.
Well, I think specifically when I looked you guys up and I was like, this would be awesome. You guys sounded fun enough to just sort of go with my excuse for being on the show. Right. And like I said before, we're always making excuses to do things instead of not. But when I first started thinking about this, it was like the biggest lesson I can teach about Ahab is that he's an icebreaker, and you should have one, whether it's, you're walking your pet, like your dog, and everybody always says, oh, it's so cute. What breed is it? And it starts a conversation, right? Ahab does the same thing. And I think for you guys, like red hair, right? Like that's the biggest icebreaker that you don't, it's not a hat. It's not a shirt, you own it, you wear it, right? And as soon as I was thinking about coming on the show, it was just like, you guys already start with this icebreaker. And I haven't, I've met plenty of redheads in my life, but all the ones I've met have always been just sort of excited or exciting about like their hair or their, just their culture background, everything about it type of thing. I don't think I've really met too many that haven't enjoyed it. But when I was listening, I listened to a bunch of episodes of the podcast before I came on, and I didn't realize how I never think of unique things as being a flaw in any way. I always like, oh, I'm so jealous you have this thing or that thing, like that's how I always see it. So I didn't realize, I never think of the other side of the coin with this stuff. But I'd think of icebreakers and how that, especially in high school, like creating an identity, everything like that, like I looked like everybody else type of thing, it wasn't, I didn't have a way to stick out back then and things like that. And we talk about that kind of thing, like not that you have to stick out, but how do you start conversations with people? And, if it's the color of their hair, a funny hat, a statue, whatever it is, like you should be looking and finding those unique things about people, and a compliment about something unique never leads to a bad conversation. So
true. Those are very wise words, actually, especially in this day and age when people don't know how to talk to people anymore.
No, oh, it's ridiculous. Even half of my family won't do anything but text at this point. It's so bad.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any, and I don't like to bring this up all the time, but you have tons of positive. Do you get negative at all? Do you get people saying, this is a joke? Like, what are you doing? Like, you must get something.
Yeah, no. And honestly, I think my biggest triumphs with Ahab, or where all the passion comes from and the energy to do it. Like, yeah, when you're doing positive, great stuff, or you just accomplished something, sure, it's really easy to get things done. But when we hear no from, we ask to partner with so many places, and some do say like, this is a little too silly, or this, we don't quite get it, or, they don't spend the 10 minutes to look into it enough to understand that it's, a prank in a way, but the most positive one you could have. And it's just, it's crazy how much work we get done when we're in a low point and a high point. It's the middle ground that we don't get anything done in, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's just harder when everything's sort of just smooth. Like we need sort of a rough sea going on one way or another. It's enjoyable when you can master it.
Okay. One last question, because there was something about a brewery on here too. And I'm a sucker for beer. So tell me, tell me more.
Well, so yeah, on our Instagram or anywhere, anytime people tell us about things on their bucket list, we add them to ours, but we always have one that's sort of a focus. It might not be the next one we do. We sort of just roll with wherever, people their passions are and what they want to do and who wants to go somewhere. But yeah, so our next one is making like an Ahab's ale. He's a wannabe pirate. So, there's so many things we didn't talk about. He has silver pirate coins. Yeah. He's got a pirate dagger, he's making a crew and all that stuff. There's just certain checkpoints he needs to get to become a real life pirate someday. So the ale is the next one, the grog. So we're looking for breweries to collaborate with whenever the timeline is right, type of thing, to sort of make an ale and have it be something you would cheers over and actually give you courage for the next step, not just a conversation that really motivates you for 5 minutes, but just like my grandfather and his naval buddies sitting around the table, like they all cheersed over a drink and sort of swore to do what they did. And now this is where I am 79 years later. So Crazy. It's just one of those things. That's why we want to do it. So people, when they're drinking it, they learn a little bit about Ahab and they say, you know what, this thing we've been putting off, let's do it. That's our focus for the grog.
Huh.
What happens when it gets into the rum? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a rum collaboration next time.
I mean, it either has to be on the East Coast or maybe the West Coast, but I mean, somewhere along the Eastern Seaboard here is where that partnership's going to come along. I mean,
yeah.
So now I have more questions.
Yeah.
You brought up this bucket list. So he has a list of things he has to do to be a full pirate. So what other things has he completed? Like what's on the list that's been completed? And can you tease a couple of things that come after the brewing the beer?
So they're not all focused on, piracy type of things, but,
Right.
we're trying to commandeer locations in that sense. But yeah, I mean, he's visited 43 of the states now, and dozens of national parks. Next year, we started with road trips because as, kids in college or right after college, it was much easier to take weeks and weeks on the road. And we used to do that a lot. And I think next summer, we're going to get back into that. We're going to try to work with the National Parks Service for sure and do some bigger things, but maybe like Cruise America or other companies like that and make some sort of fun adventure that's the teaser for next summer, I think that's our big focus. But yeah, it's really whatever comes up. In the past, we've done, like I said, anything from whitewater rafting, camping, skydiving things to museums and Comic-Cons, but it's not limited to anything.
I don't know. I mean, I have something I want to know. Speed round. I want to do a little speed round for you. 5 little questions, and they have to be pretty quick. So, and this is all about Captain Ahab and his favorites. And so, favorite food.
Favorite food for Ahab?
Oh yeah,
I think it's mahi mahi. So we went deep sea fishing once, and they cooked it for us right after and everything, and sort of made a big deal out of it just for him, even though obviously he wasn't eating. But that's a meal that was sort of focused on him again for no reason, but
for a reason.
Yeah.
Well, right. But
that's right.
But yeah.
Okay.
I think that was one of our favorite meals as a adventure focus.
Okay. So that's favorite food. Favorite music.
Yeah. Let's see. He's been to a couple concerts, but I'd have to say he likes what I like. My favorite would be Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots.
There we go.
I think that's our road trip music is sort of along that lines.
Yeah, okay.
Good choice.
And pop culture, whatever's going on at the time.
So no sea shanties, or does that ever creep into the mix?
I'm sure. It has before, but that's not our, it's not. If you're going on a 10-minute drive, you're not going to hear it.
Yeah. Okay.
I do also enjoy the fact that your favorite singer is a redhead. Anyway, we'll carry
There you go. Love how you circle that back.
Tie that back in. Yeah.
That's amazing, Tosh. It's amazing. Favorite place to visit. What was your favorite place for Ahab's visit to visit? Yeah. What was your favorite place?
I think it was the U.S. Virgin Islands. We used to volunteer at Veers, which is a resource station, just sort of a scientific station type of thing. And we used to go down when we got sick of the winter and just volunteer and help with studies and clean up the beach and that kind of stuff. But it was our own little paradise that, we got. It was the closest thing to sort of piracy, being on the island. We go bury stuff and have some fun with the kids that came and things like that. And it was just, I think it was the closest thing if we were 300 years earlier that we would have been doing.
Yeah. Sun, rain, or snow?
I'm going to go with sun. We live in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, so being May, it just turned into summer for us, we say, for, the 4 months. And then.
Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, Ahab's favorite candy.
Ahab's favorite candy.
Yeah, what's that road food, that road candy that you take on with you every time?
We worked with Pez before, which was a lot of fun, and Smarties. So it's one of those things where we've done tours of both factories. So that's up there in our favorites. But goldfish, big boxes of goldfish is our road trip food.
Man, you're tying into ginge
too.
everywhere.
Yeah. It's like I knew what you were going to ask before I even came on.
Yeah.
What does your family think of the adventures? Do they love the fact that you've carried this on?
So there's a yes and no. There's sort of like the dark sides of it too. Out of 34 people that it sort of could have happened to in a way, shape, or form, I was obviously more, favored by them in the way I, always was around them and things like that. And there's other people that didn't like it as much. But my grandmother, until she passed, she would always love seeing Ahab in the back of my truck when I pulled up to her house and things like that. And she knew what it was before. she could never fathom what it is now.
Yeah.
Even before she passed 6 years ago, it was one of those things that just, she always enjoyed seeing it because she knew what it was, but she, you know, at some point she stopped learning what it became, type of thing, which isn't a big deal. It's just, we took it to a level of crazy that most people don't understand in our family, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, okay. What's one of those?
Well, just like, yeah, well, we trekked, you know, 3.5 months through Patagonia, and that was before we created a backpack for him. So I've been shouldering him like an 80s boombox for most of these adventures, except for Kilimanjaro is the only one. So
does Ahab come into every single room of your house with you, or does he have a pedestal that you put him on? Like, is he in bed with you? And like everyone's going to want to know. So, I mean,
yeah, no, it's a good question. It's not the first time it's been asked.
I bet.
No, a lot of times I'll leave him out there in the forge. Like he's got a corner out there. You know, he'll sit by the desk. He's got a little stump stool over here that he has. But yeah, I don't take him literally every